From time to time, we get questions from doctors about how quickly after a visit that documentation or medical records must be complete, must be taken care of and in the record. And the answer is interesting because as we begin to dig into this and as we look at the different provider manuals and contracts and guidelines that are out there for the various carriers, whether they be NGS, which is our Medicare carrier or our Medicare contractor for our particular region and state, or Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, United Healthcare, and others. It's interesting because all of them actually point to Medicare's definition. And what Medicare lays out in their guidelines is this. Medicare indicates that the documentation is required to be completed as soon as practicable after the service is provided in order to maintain an accurate medical record. So the key is here, as soon as practicable. Now, what's interesting, even though they point to this, they all begin to make their own refinements in that particular area and give a bit more clarity as to exactly what they expect. Now, NGS is interesting. They're the tightest of everyone that we looked at, and really most of what we looked at, the dates range from within 24 hours, should be done on the date of service. Almost all of them say that, but you have between 24 hours and at the very most 72 hours. However, don't just go with that guideline. You really need to understand what the carriers expect and what's in their provider manuals. Now, NGS is the most restrictive. NGS indicates that generally speaking, the service should be documented on the same date on which it is performed. The service should be documented on the same date on which it is performed. Now, that seems to be a bit tighter than even what Medicare lays out, even though NGS is a Medicare contractor. Now, let's look at UHC. And what does United Healthcare indicate? Now, United Healthcare indicates a bit more broad, less specific. They say generate documentation at the time of service or shortly thereafter. So that even seems to be a bit tighter than what we might find with Medicare's definition. Now, Blue Cross Blue Shield actually really kind of lays this out. They point specifically to Medicare, yet again, another carrier that does that. But then they kind of broaden that a bit more. They indicate that that a reasonable expectation would be no more than 24 to 48 hours away from the service yourself. So if you're documenting cases and you see a patient that's got Blue Cross Blue Shield, what Blue Cross says, it should be no more than 24 to 48 hours after that service is completed. And that is if you do not get it done on the same date of service. But they add to this, and this is where it gets very interesting and problematic, is that anything after 48 hours may be considered unreasonable. And when we start talking about an insurance carrier talking about something being unreasonable, just know that that's really important to notate, because if it's unreasonable, then it very well may not be reimbursable. And so we wanted you to know these timelines. We're going to cover this again next week. In our video next week, we're going to talk about the risks associated with delaying past the guideline areas and the manual requirements in each one of these carriers or for Medicare or whatever the case might be. What are some of the risks associated if you do not get them done in an appropriate amount of time? We'll catch you next week.